Oh, hello. Do you think that Big Brother's watching? Or that the Illuminati is planning to take over the world? Have you happened to have an encounter with a space alien today? Well, if the answer to those questions is yes, then grab your hat. This is tinfoil hat time. We are going to talk today about entertainment. How we are in this country, maybe the Western world around us, entertained into a stupor. So that's what's on our agenda for today. What do you guys think? Are you entertained into a stupor? Do you pay attention to the things that are going on around you? Just curious to find out if we are all entertained into a stupor. So, what do we have to say about being entertained into a stupor? Well, there is a fabulous anonymous video, actually, which talks about the 9 ways that our society is being dumbed down by the elites. And I hate using the word elites. But like a lot of these crazy conspiracy theories, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, if you're watching this for the first time, I'm actually not a conspiracy theorist. But what I've been starting to see lately is some of these things are starting to show up and look more and more and have actual solid documented evidence. And that's what tinfoil hat time is about. It's about taking things that are on this realm of conspiracy and moving it over and going, maybe there's a lot more truth to this than we actually believed. So, I'm not a 9/11 truther, and I don't have any qualms about, any comment at all on the whole JFK or anything else. I've outside of being a teenager, I don't think I've ever questioned Area 51. It's just a matter of that's not where I want to take things. I don't want to speculate on weirdness, but what I do want to do is focus on the things that we start to see. And what was fascinating, though, about that anonymous video I brought up, and I can't remember the title of it. It was some clickbaity title for sure that had nothing to do with the thing, but they made 9 points about the ways that society is kind of being dumbed down. And actually, that's what I'm going to talk about here today is one of those 9 ways. And maybe I'll cover some of the other 9 ways in some of the videos. And who knows, maybe I'll find one of the masks to wear, right? Would that be cool? The tinfoil hat with one of those vendetta masks? That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? But regardless, we're going to jump in here and have a look at the entertainment industry. And a lot of it's because, we're on the middle of the Christmas shopping season now, and we've had, pretty soon, if it wasn't already released or will be released in the next week or so, the new Star Wars movie, and then we had the whole Battlefront controversy. We're going to have a look at video games first and then do an kind of auxiliary stuff on the other items, because I've talked about the other items quite a bit. And so we actually want to start our discussion today having a look at an article from The Guardian. And I'm not the biggest fan of The Guardian, but I thought this article was very fascinating. This is effectively, it's kind of like an interview with this gentleman, I believe it's Matthew Crawford, who wrote a book, which I actually want to read now after reading this article. And so we're going to start by looking at this article, and then we're going to have a look at some of the other factors around here. So basically, the title of this is Matthew Crawford. And I have no idea who Matthew Crawford is. Anybody? Who's Matthew Crawford? I don't know. I didn't even have a chance to look into who is this guy. Academic motorcycle mechanic. Okay, so he's an academic and a motorcycle mechanic. Okay, good enough. So distraction is a kind of obesity of the mind, and that really struck me as a title. So I decided I'd go ahead and stop and read this article, and it was fabulous. Have a look at this. All right, so before I met Matthew Crawford, I loved air travel. Let's jump down to the meat of the thing. We don't want to get into the introductions. The creeping clamor of our eyeballs, our eyeball time is at the starting point of Crawford's book, The World Beyond Your Head. So that's the book. I think I kind of want to read that. It looks like my hat's coming unseen there. All right. The World Beyond Your Head, a kind of philosophical treatise on how to cope with modernity that starts with annoying ads and ends with a critique of the whole Enlightenment thought. He was inspired to write it when he was out shopping and noticed that ads popped up on the card machine during the delay of a few seconds while he entered his PIN. That pisses me off, by the way. When I see that, I go to the bank, put in the card for the ATM, they want to push me an ad about a home equity loan. No, bank. I'd rather not. And then you wonder why I come in to do business with you directly, and then I have to deal with your, ooh, let's look at your account review. No, my account's doing just fine, thank you. Just deposit my stupid money. All right. A kind of philosophical treatise on how to cope with modernity that starts with the whole annoying ads and ends with a... Let's see, I already read that part. Okay, ads are everywhere. On hotel room keys, on x-ray trays at the airport security, and on handrails in the escalators. And apparently on urinals, if Mr. Friendly has its way. I realized how pervasive this had all become. These little appropriations of attention, he said. Figuring out ways to capture and hold people's attention is the center of contemporary capitalism. Which it's not capitalism, by the way. We're going to comment on that in a minute. There is this invisible and ubiquitous grabbing at something that's most intimate thing you have because it determines what is present in your consciousness. It makes it impossible to think or rehearse a remembered conversation, and you can't chat with a stranger because we all try to close ourselves off from this grating condition of being addressed all the time. He points out the only quiet, distraction-free place in the airport is the business class lounge, where all you hear is the occasional tinkling of a spoon against china. Silence has become a luxury good. The people in the value of their science very highly. The people in there value their silence very highly. If you are in that lounge, you can use the time to think creative, playful thoughts. You could come up with some brilliant marketing scheme that you would use to determine the character of a peon section, or you can think of the transfer of wealth. Attention is a resource convertible into actual money. Now, the reason I wanted to take a pause about capitalism is capitalism is not what our society is right now. And there's a lot of people like, we're in a capitalist society because we are in what looks like a capitalist society. We are not in a capitalist society. We are in either a corporatocracy or an oligarchy. What that means is that there is a group of companies or a group of individuals that guide the laws in the nation. See, if capitalism has an element of morality, you cannot have capitalism departing from morality. In true capitalism, the person selling the product does actually care about the person they're selling the product to. That is not the case in our modern society, where people are seen as units of production. And we're going to look and dive into that a lot deeper. But we are not in a capitalist society, because capitalism values the individual. What we have does not, and that is a distinction to be made. We met in a bright day. I think there's a typo in the article. In March at Shuktu Moto, a red brick garage on the side of Richmond, Virginia. When he is not thinking about how we ought to live, Crawford works as a motorcycle mechanic. Let's see if we can turn and find something else there. Let's see, we increasingly encounter the world through these representations that are addressed to us, often with manipulative intent. Video games, pornography, gambling apps on your phone, he says. These experiences are so exquisitely attuned to our appetites that they can swamp your ordinary way of being in the world. Just as food engineers have figured out how to make food hyper-palatable by manipulating fat, salt, and sugar, similarly, media has become an expert at making irresistible mental stimuli. Distraction is a kind of obesity in the mind, in other words, with results that could be just as hazardous for our health. See, and that is a reality of this, is that as this gentleman is talking about this, it is true. The companies in the food industry are looking for what is called the bliss point. They will literally take Cheez-Its as an example, and then they will be experimenting with a formula where they will bring in hundreds of people on panels, and they will be given 2 samples. Sample 1, sample 2, which one tastes better? And then they do this through thousands of interactions to find the absolute perfect balance that the vastest majority of people absolutely love, and that is why if you go into the grocery store and buy something with a product label on it, with a UPC code, anything with a label is suspect, as one gentleman said on a documentary. Anything with a label is suspect, okay? Anything you buy tastes wonderful. Like, you can hate cheese, and Cheez-Its are like addictive. I know, I have a Cheez-It addiction. That's why I try not to buy Cheez-Its. Because if I buy a box of Cheez-Its, the thing's gone in less than a day. They have perfectly engineered it with an amazing bliss point to addict you. So you cannot eat just one. That's like Lay's motto, you cannot just eat one, or whatever variation it is true. But the reality is that's what they're doing to our bodies. And what we're going to look at today is they're applying the same stuff to our minds. Even on WebMD, we have a article giving its tip of the tinfoil hat to video game addiction. So compulsive video gaming in a modern day psychological disorder that experts tell WebMD is becoming more and more popular. In fact, in Pennsylvania was the first ever United States-based therapy group that recognized video game addiction. And I believe it was either in Scranton or it was in Philadelphia. It was one of those two, and I forget which one it was. But basically they talk about, here's an addiction treatment at Amsterdam, Netherlands. Teenagers and young adults begin to detox by admitting they are powerless over their addiction. But these addicts are not hooked on drugs or alcohol. They are going cold turkey to break their dependence on video games. Okay, so Keith Bacher, director of Smith & Jones at Addiction Consultants, tells WebMD he created the new program in response to the growing problem among young men and boys. The more we looked at it, the more we saw gaming was taking over the lives of kids. Detox for video game addiction may sound like a stretch, but addiction experts say the concept makes sense. See, and here's the thing. I'm not a huge gamer, and there are types of games, and actually I have a book that I have 95% of the manuscript done, which addresses this issue. And there are things that make games addictive, and there are good games. So if you want to know what type of game is good, a game is good if it has a definitive start and end point, like maybe a per round. So I play Warcraft 3. I will not go near World of Warcraft. It is completely addictive. It is open-ended. You do better the more you play it. There is no definitive end. There's no end point. And if you don't check on there every once and again, wow, you lose your things. Those are some of the traits of an addictive game. And we're going to talk more about those in a little bit. But the overall point is that in the midst of this gaming addiction stuff, a game that is too easy, too fast, like Tetris, that is highly addictive. Something like Super Mario Brothers, not so much so. The older style of Nintendo games were, for the most part, not super addictive. It's when you started getting into the large world games. The first one I remember was, I think it was Final Fantasy 13, maybe? I forget. Maybe it was Final Fantasy 11. And whatever came out around 2004, 2005, that Final Fantasy had such a large open world that you could play it for literally hours and hours and hours and days and never really get too far. Well, what's happening now is the entire game concept is open-ended. And open-ended games are more addictive. And the more you play, the more addictive. And the more you spend, the more addictive. And so we're going to dive into this after we talk about what a video game addict had to say. So this is on the Star Wars Battlefront Reddit, and this guy here is 19 years old, and he is a gambling addict, and he writes here an open letter to DICE, EA, and other devs. All right, so... And he gives us a TLRD. Maybe we'll just read that first. So I do not blame any of my choices on any company that have microtransactions. My choices are my own, and so is my addiction. I just wish that someone had told me of the dangers before I started. Now, as summary of my story, I'm 19 years old. I am paid $15 an hour. I started spending on in-app purchases, moved to real video games, started at CSGO. I don't know what CSGO is. Skins, and then on to gambling scene there. Spent around $10,000 that I can prove in the last 2 years. Please help microtransactions to be known as far as a more dangerous type of purchase than a pack of gum. At my worst, I was working 2 jobs and considering dropping out of high school. Please consider how unregulated microtransactions can affect the youth of the world. So we're actually going to stop right there and comment on a few things. Number one, he is partially right when he says it's not his own, he's not blaming the companies. I hold some, not all, some degree of the blame on the companies, because these gaming companies are hiring PhDs in human behavioral psychology to figure out how it takes to get people hooked onto these games. When you as a gamer have to hire a PhD in human development in order to sell a video game, addict a child to your game, you need to burn in hell. That's what you need to do. That's a problem. That is a problem. It is a challenge, and I blame parts of these companies because they're making their games as addictive as they can possibly make them in order to sell them as much as they can possibly sell them, in order to get them to buy and buy and buy. And they don't care if they're 13. They don't care if they're 17. They don't care if they're broke. They don't care if they're putting on a credit card. All they want is the green cash, and they don't care about the unit of production, the poor child that has lost his life. And I will remind you that financial problems is the number one cause of suicide among young men. These game developers need to be held accountable. Now, there is an element where we need to help teach kids that you need to avoid these types of games. You need to avoid these types of games. All right? And so he does say here that his choices are his own, that it is his addiction. And the reality is when somebody is addicted, it's not just them. There are outside factors that affected the addiction. We as people are not alone, isolated to an island among ourselves. We are part of a greater society. And it asks the question, what can a person do in their responsibility, and what can the society do in their responsibility? And when you have an unaccountable corporate entity that is doing everything they can to hook a kid onto a game, therein lies the problem. And that's why government is supposed to help protect the people. But the sad thing is right now is our government doesn't help protect the people. Now, on the flip side, I'm not all for the democracy or the democratic point of view that says the government has to protect everybody. No, the government just needs to keep the companies in line and let us make our own choices. It's a balance between the two parties, and neither parties have it right. So he says he's 19, he played for $15 an hour and started to spend on in-app purchases. Now, in-app purchases are what causes a lot of hassle in this world. And so that is one of those challenges that we have, is that the gaming industry is just starting to see how far they can push the boundaries on any given thing, and that is what is going on. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and read his whole argument. I'm going to try and put all my references here in the video, so you can come down here and read the rest of the argument. I think that part's there because we have a ways yet to go before we jump in. So next, let's have a look at how the video game industry does this. And I actually pulled this article from Cracked, of all places, because they actually had a lot of fascinating points. So 5 creepy ways video games are trying to get you addicted. And this is where we come back full circle and say, yes, it's not just, okay, I got addicted to video games. It's like, if I went out and I shoot up some heroin because I'm stupid, my addiction has a whole lot more. But if I go into a hospital and they could have given me Tylenol, but they gave me fentanyl instead, and I get highly addicted to fentanyl, and that's what I talked about in the tinfoil hat time of maybe about a month ago or so. You get into that, and what starts to happen is we can get dragged down by the decisions of society, and those drug companies fast push that thing through against recommendations of people who said this is going to be a bad deal. And so this is these companies, 5 ways that they get them. Number 5. So they're kind of going 5 to 1. I don't know. So 5 to 1 puts you in a skinnier box. So what this means is that reducing your space, reducing your area. And they don't really define this very well, but from reading the article, the context, I could come up with 2 views. Number 1 is reducing your ability to get away from the stimuli. So forcing the game on you on all of your means and modes. So can you save your status on your smartphone and resume on your computer and link it to the same account? That's one possible interpretation. Another thing is just putting it constantly out there in front of your ads. This is the one I wish they would have done a better job at defining what is this skinnier box. Now the concept comes from research. So let's see. It's written by a game researcher at Microsoft on how video games that hook players, whether they like it or not. He has a doctoral in... Okay, so here is a video game researcher for Microsoft with a doctorate in behavioral and brain sciences. Each contingency is an arrangement of time, activity, and reward. And there is an infinite number of ways these elements can be combined to produce a pattern activity you want from your players. You see, that is unethical. It is unethical to develop a game that is so addictive that your players are forced to keep on buying. All right? The article does not contain the word fun or enjoyment, and that's not his field. His field is on the pattern of activity that you want, okay? His theories are based around the work of B.F. Skinner, who discovered you could control behavior by training subjects with a simple stimulus and reward. He invented the skinnier box, a cage consisting of a small animal that, for instance, press a lever to get pellets. Okay, now it's not just press a lever to get pellets, though. Because if every time you press a lever to get pellets, press a lever to get pellets, press a lever to get pellets, it's too easy. You're conditioned to say, every time I press a lever, I get pellets. But that hurts you. Okay. The challenge is, now of course, I think the way they're playing this here is the game used to be sold to us. Now it's basically a subscription. Now, number 4 is creating the virtual food pellets to eat. We're actually going to get into the point I was going to get into here in a moment. And so creating the virtual food pellets for you to eat. So most addictive based games are based on this fact. Your brain treats items and goods in the video game world as if they are real because they are. Okay, so if you've ever played a game where you keep on mining or harvesting or going back and over and over and over to a field to find that one weapon or that one armor or XP or whatever else you're trying to farm, that's what we're talking about. They've got you hooked into the cycle to keep doing the same action over and over in the hopes that you get it. See, if you did the action once and you got it, no problem. It's the randomness and the chance that causes the problem. Actually, they have some of the research listed down here. Making you press lever. This is the point I was getting to earlier. So we have a rat in a box here, and if you train the rat in the box, every time he touches the pedal, he gets food. He actually starts touching it, he likes the food, and then he stops. But if you get the rat to press the lever, the stimulus comes at a random interval of you pressing the lever. You keep pressing the lever. You keep pressing, you keep pressing, you keep pressing, you keep pressing, because every 5 or 6 or whatever times you press it, and it's a random number, you'll get the reward. But then they have more rewards. So there's always a better gun. There's always a better armor. There's always a better thing. So you keep pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing. So the idea is we have some variation here where you can show this guy here is the guy that gets him to press the button the most. Okay. So it's variable ratio rewards is what this is called. This is the exact functionality that you get inside the loot boxes. You got to buy the loot box. You open it up, and you might get a reward. Well, you will get a reward, and it may or may not be a good reward. So the idea is you keep buying it. You keep buying it, and you keep buying it. Now, the greatest example of this I've ever seen is I used to play Magic the Gathering a lot more than I do now. I don't mind a good, every now and again, Commander game right now, but even that's kind of becoming stupid. But way back, I think it was when the Zendikar, the Return to Zendikar back came out, was a year and a half, 2 years ago, and they had, for the first time, these expedition lands. These expedition lands were excessively rare, and when the boxes were released, they were excessively expensive. Like you could get $90 for one if you sold them. I mean, easy. Some of them were selling for like $300-$400. I actually watched a guy in a card shop. Pay $600. He bought a box on boxes. A box of cards, 36 packs, costs about $100. He guys in, it's like $115 or so. He drops $115. Like, oh, I hope I got my expedition land. He opens the whole thing up. He gets lots of cool things. Doesn't get the expedition land. It's eating away at him. 10 minutes later, he bought another box. Nothing. 10 minutes later, he bought another box. I watched this guy over the course of 2.5-3 hours that night spend over $650 on boxes of Magic cards to find an expedition land. And on his 6th box, $650 later, he pulled his expedition land. The holy grail of the Zendikar block, the expedition lands. And he loved it, he cherished it, and before the end of the night, he had traded it for cards that were in the case at $20 a pop. And then he had to figure out how to hide the fact from his wife that he just spent $650 on Magic cards. That for me was the day. I've never bought a pack of Magic cards since then. Never. And I have no intention to. I've opened some packs. I've won some packs in tournaments. I don't mind going for a fun evening and paying $15 for a draft. Get 3 packs, randomly pick a card, pass it around to the next, have a good time, have a hoot, win some matches, get some cards, get some, But if I want a specific card for a specific deck, it's way cheaper to just buy it. To be honest. And that's the matter they're doing in the video games. And when it's a physical thing like a Magic card, they start piling up in the corner and you see it. You see the result of the addiction. In a video game, you don't. And that's what they're doing. So that's the thing. They keep you pushing that lever because in response to the lever, you have a random chance of getting something. So then they just keep you pressing the lever forever by always having new things. And this is the biggest problem with DLC and constant video game updates is because, the new update, they're releasing 3 guns. So now 3 new guns are released in the latest update to the video game. So people are going to buy until their bank goes bye-bye. All for the hopes of randomly getting the chance of getting one of those 3 guns, or maybe all 3, because you gotta have the whole set. How many people watched the new Star Wars series or bought it, even though it was claimed as the worst Star Wars ever? I guess I was talking about the Force Awakens, the worst Star Wars ever. How many people bought it just because they needed to have the full Star Wars collection? I'm not giving Disney another penny. Not a chance. They've taken everything and they have taken all of those Star Wars fans and compressed them through a giant thing to extract every dollar out of their fan base as they possibly can and just ease up for another year so they can save up so we can press them some more and get them entertained to the point where they give us all their money. It's like us, right? Driving our wheel and ratting a wheel, all right? And then, of course, the last thing, getting you to call the skinnier box their home. So those are kind of those ways that the video game companies keep us addicted. All right. So here's the point of all of this, is that we are being addicted to games. We are being constantly forced games, constantly pushed games, constantly everything games, to the point to where we are being entertained into just an absolute stupor. We have lost the ability to control ourselves, and it's constantly put up before us. I've, in fact, noted this at the decline of American churches is directly tied with the smartphone industry and the social media industry. Because right around 2010, smartphones came out, social media was becoming prominent, and then what ended up happening is people were so constantly distracted by the little things in front of them, they've lost their focus on everything else in the world. It wasn't just God they lost their focus on. They lost focus on God. They lost focus on their church. They lost focus on their jobs. They lost focus on their finances. And now we're looking up almost a decade after that. and looking back, our churches have declined. Our finances have declined. Our thinking has declined. And we are entertained into a stupor. Addictive video games. We didn't even go into the Netflix. We didn't go into the constant full entertainment of all kinds at your fingertips, and you don't even own any of it. You don't own your games anymore. You don't own your movies anymore. You don't own your music anymore. Everything is a subscription service. Everything. Everything. And we are so after our own entertainment. We are so after our own addictions. We are so after our own everything. We have no real say in what we're doing anymore. And entertaining ourselves into a stupor is one of the ways that they control us, because we're giving out money month after month after month after month for subscription services, for video games, for DLCs, for loot boxes, for everything. We're giving it all. We're giving it all. We're giving it all. And we have no concept of how to control ourselves. That's a challenge, people. So thank you for watching this tinfoil hat time. If you'd like to help support what we're doing, check out switchtolinux.com/support. You can learn about how you can best help support what we're doing. The best way, there's a lot of good ways, but one of the better ways is Amazon. If you shop on Amazon, use the affiliate link down below. Doesn't cost you anything, and Amazon will send us a very small tip. Also, I'm on Patreon. You will get unedited versions of my live streams, and I put up my ebooks up there as well when I write some books. So thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.